All right, Braves fans, let's get rolling. I'm George McNair, and this is State of the Braves. Well, guys, as always, good to be back with you. Good to be talking about the Atlanta Braves. And look, it's been an uneven year so far. I think that's fair to say. Not a lot of sustained winning. I mean, there's been some good lately. I think the Braves are definitely playing a little better as of late, and so that's something certainly to be happy about, but it's still some up and downs. And, like this current road trip, uh, 3-4 on the road trip. It started really well. They played really well against the Yankees, and then pretty flat against the Cardinals, and then against this, of course, this one game, uh, makeup game against the White Sox. That just offense totally doesn't show up, and they lose 1-0. It's kind of a downer of a way to end the road trip. But they come back home and they have won the first two games against the Pirates, and you're feeling a little better. I mean, still the offense has been super inconsistent. The pitching is certainly more consistent, maybe outside of the fifth starter and what might happen there. But that being said, this inconsistency of road and home has been a real thing this year. The Braves are 2 games under 500 on the road this year, while they are 26-13 at home. I mean, that home record is very nice. It's really, going into the season, it's kind of the level of what you would expect the Braves to play at home, and yet on the road you kind of expect more from a good team. It's in some ways, I'm kind of surprised their road record isn't even worse. I mean, they've had a couple of brutal road trips this season so far. I especially remember that really brutal West Coast road trip they had earlier in the year when, of course, they really weren't playing well. But all that being said, if they can turn that around and start winning more games on the road, they always play well at home. That might be one way that they can get a little more sustained winning, and roll off 10 out of 12 or an 8-game winning streak or that sort of thing. They could really get them to put some pressure on the Phillies. So there have been some positive things happening. Last time I came on, there were just the early signs of Austin Riley coming out of his basically season-long slump, and that has continued in a really good way. So that's definitely a huge positive to lean into and to take some time talking about. So look, while Austin Riley has come to life, and there was that brief power surge in New York against the Yankees and a little bit against the Tigers before that as well. The offense as a whole has really just remained inconsistent. We've seen that over these last 12 to 14 games. In that time, in these last 12 games is what I'm really focusing on, they have scored 3.5 runs per game, including scoring less than 3 runs in 3 of their last 4 games. And, of course, they were shut out against the White Sox in that makeup game in Chicago. Just such a dud game to lose 1-0 to a team that's 40 games under 500 halfway through the season. We're literally like right at the halfway mark now of the season. White Sox are like 20. I think by winning that game, they're like 22-61. Losing 1-0 in Chicago really stinks. That whole to start the year in Chicago thing really still gets on my nerves. The MLB sending the Braves to a cold weather city, getting that game rained out in like 35-degree weather, rain out game, and then having to come back to Chicago in the middle of the year. Look, maybe I'm just complaining, but it was such an awkward place to shove in that game. And then, of course, the Braves show up for that one game flat, which you would expect them to be flat in that situation. And you'd still like them to figure out a way to beat a really bad team in the White Sox, but they didn't do it. All that being said, of course, they come back home and things get right again, and they've won the last 2 games against Pittsburgh. But refocusing back on the offensive inconsistency, I really think a lot of this is due to the lack of lineup depth. I mean, that is one of the things that made the Braves offense so great last year, so dominant, one of the greatest offenses in the history of baseball. Remember, you had Michael Harris for most of the year hitting 9th. You had a much better offensive Orlando Arcia. and of course you had Ronald Acuna at the top. So there's that too. But I'm really focusing on the back end right now of the lineup. It's just very starkly different right now than it was last year. And of course, Michael Harris being out, being hurt, is a big part of that. Unfortunately, it looks like he won't be able to return until after the All-Star break. You have Duvall struggling, though, of course, coming through with the big hit to win the game today. So that was very good. But Duvall generally has been struggling. I think he's still hitting about 160. Orlando Arcia has really been struggling. He's hitting about 210. And so these two guys near the bottom, they've got to get it going more. Duvall just has not performed against righties at all and hasn't been able to win or hold down a full-time outfield job since Ronald went down with his injury. And again, I mean, ironically, Duvall comes through against a right-handed pitcher today, but that has been few and far between for him. So I'm sure it felt really good for him to do that. Um, Maybe it will be a sign of some things to come because we know what he's capable of doing. He can get hot and really be a dominant player for brief periods of time. So maybe that's coming for him, but it certainly hasn't happened yet. But yeah, thank goodness he came through to win the game today. It was a really big moment. Ramon Laureano has also really filled in quite nicely in the outfield since the Braves called him up from AAA. And he's had a little bit of injury over the last couple of days, but I think he'll be back in the lineup soon against righties. The story is he came up as a pretty highly touted prospect with the A's, had quite a few good years with them, but the last basically 3 years, he's just totally lost his game. Cleveland released him, a few weeks ago. The Braves snagged him up. He was in AAA. They worked on him with some swing adjustments. He was hitting great in AAA. They bring him up, put him in the outfield. He's always been a really good defensive outfielder, and he's really hit since he's been up with the Braves. So hopefully, when he comes back from this little injury, he'll keep hitting and do that well. But again, he had hit 263 with a 119 WRC plus, meaning he was 19% better than the average league hitter with the A's from 2018 to 2021. So that's a pretty long stretch of solid offense production. Again, also being an above average defensive player at the same time. So he was quite a good player during those years, but he really fell off since 2021. So he's proven that he can do it in the past, and maybe being with the Braves, it will really get him going again in his career. So it could be a huge thing if Laureano can just play at the level that he did back in the day. At least against righties, he should definitely be getting starts over Duvall, unless Duvall really starts proving it like he did today. And again, I want to give him credit and certainly pull for Adam Duvall. I really do like him and all the things he's done as a Brave. Of course, Duvall and Laureano give you really good defense, so that's a good thing. But yeah, the Braves have really been lacking in the outfield, and you can't blame them. I mean, when you lose Acuna and Michael Harris, it's going to certainly test your outfield depth. Meanwhile, Orlando Arcia continues to give you very little offense. He's hitting for only a 61 WRC plus, which means he is way below league average right now. He hit 99 WRC plus, right at league average last year. So way below what he did last year. And he's projected by Fangraphs to finish with a 1.0 WAR season, which is not even starting caliber. It's pretty well below starting caliber. He's grading out as an above average defensive player. I think you can see that when you watch him, but he's a very below average offensive player right now. You guys know I'm not a huge believer in Orlando Arcia. I don't know if I have to keep saying that. Maybe I'll stop saying that. But I really hope he can start hitting at a little higher level than what he's been doing lately. He's actually hitting lefties really, really poorly. Righties, he's like hitting in the 230s, so he's not great. But for some reason, he is just not hitting lefties at all. So maybe there's an adjustment he can make to snap out of that. And then the catchers, the catchers have actually gone pretty quiet lately offensively too. Remember that the Braves had one of the most dangerous catching tandems in all baseball, probably the most dangerous offensive catching tandem last year in Travis d'Arnaud and Sean Murphy, combining for 32 home runs last year. This year only 11. Now, of course, some of that is due to Murphy being injured. He's got only 3 right now. And d'Arnaud has 7, which looks pretty good on paper, but 3 of those came in one game, so they're really bunched up. It just feels like for quite a while the catchers just have not been contributing a ton offensively. So again, if the catchers start getting hot, especially Sean Murphy, if he can start doing some things, if Duvall can get back on track and Arcia just gives you something offensively, then the bottom of that lineup really does start to extend. And I think the Braves won't have these stretches of games where they're only scoring 1, 2, 3 runs a game because they're so reliant on the top 4 in the lineup right now, top 5 in the lineup to do something. And those bottom 4 guys just really aren't doing much lately. But thankfully, one of the guys in the top 5, Austin Riley, has been doing some things lately, and it is so good to see that. Riley has come to life in part thanks to his swing plane adjustments. The broadcast has talked about that some, not in depth, but uh, there was something, maybe he was dropping his back shoulder, or there was just something that was a little off with Riley. And of course, we talked about that. It was like there has to be something wrong here because he was just missing fastballs right down the middle and that sort of thing. He was hitting the fastball so poorly. I basically dedicated an episode to Riley's inability at the time to hit a fastball and how weird it was. And that's totally turned around almost to the day since I did that podcast. So, he hit a fastball for a home run just yesterday. It was, right on the outside corner, about belt high, and he hit it to dead center field. Excellent swing and just what you want. So he's hit 6 home runs in his last 14 games. He had only hit 3 home runs in the 53 games before that, which almost seems impossible that he only did that, only hit 3 home runs with the kind of power Austin Riley has. So of those 6 that he's hit in the last 14 games, the last 5 were all off of fastballs, and all of those fastballs were from 93 to 97 miles an hour. So, when he was not capable of hitting the fastball before, you start thinking, gosh, is his bat slowing down? Is he just not, is he not able to hit fastballs anymore? What's happening? No, his bat speed is fine. And with that adjustment, he's just proven it. Of course, I'm sure teams are coming in with the game plan of throw him fastballs because the numbers say that for the season. But now he's catching up to him. He's hitting them to right center field, to center field. He's crushing the ball, and it is so good to see this offense is totally different when he's going. But unfortunately, thank goodness he's going, right? Because again, the bottom of that lineup just isn't doing much right now. Still some inconsistency from Matt Olson. Still some inconsistency from Ozzie Albies, and so we really need Austin Riley, and thankfully he's stepped up lately. So yeah, remember, he was hitting 118 against fastballs with no home runs through 53 games. In the last 14 games, he's hit 6 home runs against fastballs. So that's, or sorry, 5 home runs of his last 6 were against fastballs. So just awesome to see that. Jarred Kelenic has also been, I think, a really positive story, especially over the last 15 to 20 games, basically since Michael Harris went down, and maybe a little beyond that. But Kelenic's move to the leadoff spot has really paid off. And he does not seem like the obvious choice to lead off because this guy has a below average strikeout rate. He has a below average walk rate. You wouldn't think that's the guy you'd put in the leadoff spot. But ever since he's moved up to that spot, he's hit really, really well. And he hit a home run in the first inning off of Skeens today, which you could say got the Braves going, but it was the only run of the game until they won it in the 10th for them. So, homer off of Skeens, off of a fastball, pretty impressive. And Kelenic is one of the Braves that is hitting fastballs really well and really has throughout this season. And that was the track record for him as well, that he was a good fastball hitters. So he's hitting 300 versus the fastball. That was coming into play today with a 557 slugging percentage. That's second only to Marcell Ozuna on the team, who, that's probably not surprising. He's hitting 360 versus fastballs with a 618 slugging percentage. And so, yeah, really good stuff from Kelenic. He's just looking increasingly good, right? It's starting to win me over, and I was generally positive about the Kelenic trade, but he's still got to prove it, right? And so now it's really starting to make me feel good that Kelenic maybe is a guy that can stick in that outfield for the foreseeable future and maybe just keep getting better and better. As he keeps getting more and more confidence with clearly what has been a really successful early period with the Braves. Has he been dominant? Has he been an all-star level player? No, but over the last 15 games, he's played an all-star level, so that has been really good. But yeah, I mean, he's not a perfect player. Kelenic has, I mentioned the strikeout and walk rate. He's got his strikeout rate is 29.2%, which is like bottom 10% in the league. His walk rate is also bottom 10% in the league and only 6%. But again, if he's hitting at a consistent clip, that all that doesn't really matter that much, especially if he's hitting with power as well, which is what he's been doing lately. So since he moved to the leadoff spot, over the last 15 games, he's hitting 356 with 5 home runs. And that's pretty awesome production, right? So look, hopefully Kelnick can keep going. Hopefully Riley and Ozuna can keep going. And some of these other guys can really start being more consistent with their contributions. So, it does feel like the Braves are kind of, things are kind of in place for the Braves to make a nice run going into the All-Star break, maybe leading up to the trade deadline. And then on the other side of things, the Phillies are dealing with some injury issues. Uh, as you guys probably know, Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber have both gone on the 10-day IL. Schwarber with a groin issue, Harper with a hamstring pull. It might only be 10 days. Harper's maybe it could last a little longer than that. It doesn't look like either of these injuries are going to be really long term for these guys, but at the very least, you kind of wonder, okay, maybe the Phillies go 5-5 over their last 10 or the next 10 or that sort of thing. If the Braves can win eight out of 10 or 9 out of 10, okay, now we're really starting to make some headway. It feels like the Phillies just haven't gone through any kind of extended struggle. They've maybe had one or two brief downturns, but to their to their credit, they haven't had really long-term struggles so far this season. Of course, on the other end of things, the Braves haven't had uh, many like long winning streaks either. So it would be great if things could turn around, whether it's due to injury or not. Right, the Braves have certainly dealt with a lot of injuries, and that has held them back in some ways. Maybe it'll happen a little bit with the Phillies here. The Braves certainly should try to take advantage of Harper and Schwarber's absence. So at the same time, it looks like the Braves will face the Phillies without Harper and Schwarber. That series is the Phillies come to Atlanta July 5th through the 7th. And the Braves haven't played the Phillies since the opening three games of the season. So it's kind of weird that we haven't seen them for that long, but that'll obviously be a big series. And the Braves are 7 games back right now of the Phillies. Maybe they can make 1 or 2 games up before that series, and then that series becomes even, a little more, not more important, but a little more hyped, right? Because you can maybe really make some hay if you could do, maybe the Braves could sweep them. Who knows? So, as I look at this team to this point, we are close to a month away from the trade deadline. I'm just starting to think about ways, like really specific ways that I think the Braves could improve their team. That maybe Alex Anthopoulos can go out and get somebody, that sort of thing. Number one, find someone who hits righties better. The Braves as a team have been pretty poor against right-handed pitchers this year. They're only hitting that'd be nice. They're only hitting 236 against righties on the year. with a 391 slugging percentage, which is pretty weak. That's compared to against lefties, they're hitting 261 with a 433 slugging percentage, which still isn't a great slugging percentage, but overall, obviously better than they're doing against righties. And by the way, maybe this is unfair, but comparing what they're doing against righties this year, comparing it to last year they hit 272 with a 495 slugging percentage against righties. Remember, they hit 500 slugging percentage as a team against all pitchers last year. So it's a pretty stark comparison between those two. But the Braves are just not making righties pay very often, especially in the power department this year. And you look at a few players in particular. Again, Duvall, thank goodness he came through today against a righty, but coming into this game today, he was only hitting 124 against right-handed pitchers. Arcia 232, nothing to write home about. Ozzie Albies, we know he's stronger from the right side against lefties, but against righties, he's only hitting 221. So it just seems like that this team, as constructed, is just naturally weaker against righties, and it would be great to be able to put some stronger, maybe left-handed hitters in the lineup when you're facing a righty. So that's one thought that I have. Another one is to find a more consistent fifth starter, and not only to improve that spot, but also to improve some organizational pitching depth. I feel like Spencer Schwellenbach has stepped in pretty admirably. This guy jumped up from Double-A to make 5 starts in the major leagues. He's done okay. 5.40 ERA in 5 starts. There's been flashes of good, but just inconsistency, and you could kind of expect that from a guy who's young and just starting to pitch in the big leagues. He's averaging right around 5 innings per start, so he's getting some innings covered. I'm sure the Braves are pretty happy with that. But I think a more consistent fifth starter would be really great. Now, that's not easy to find, especially on the trade market. There's so many more teams with the expanded wild card now that are technically in the running, and so there's just fewer sellers during the trade deadline. So, there's no guarantee that the Braves are going to be able to find somebody. They might just have to lean on internal options. But I'm sure Anthopoulos has some ideas, and probably some outside of the box ideas of guys he could target. But organizationally, the depth just isn't there right now. It was to start the season, and it's kind of gone away. Of course, starting with Spencer Strider going down, but you've had Waldrop and Smith-Shawver get shelved with injuries. Elder certainly has not reestablished himself. Vines and Winans just feel like only spot starters at this point. You do have Ian Anderson potentially coming back. He's starting. He's pitched 2 rehab starts at the Florida Coastal League, and he's going to have another start coming up at Single A Augusta on Sunday. Tomorrow. So, that's really encouraging, and I'm really kind of intrigued by what Ian Anderson could maybe bring to the Braves in the second half of the season. But you can't rely on that, right? That's just kind of a hope and a prayer, and probably next season is when he would really reestablish himself totally. That being said, it's kind of like, yeah, the Braves need a fifth starter, and you wouldn't have thought that coming into the season. It felt like they had a lot of good options. Now, hopefully Waldrop and Smith-Shawver are not shelved for the whole season either, but we just don't fully know about them at this point. So, like I said, it may be tough for Alex to find both starting pitcher and maybe an outfielder, a lefty, who can hit righties on this market. And of course, Michael Harris returning from injury will be a part of the answer in the outfield. Very likely he'll return after the All-Star break. But even with Harris returning, you might still want to look for another guy to hit righties. Of course, my antenna is up with Jock Peterson. I'm gonna throw his name back out there. I'm sure a lot of Braves fans constantly think about that and dream about that possibility. Um, he's with the D-backs, but the D-backs are not playing well right now. They're 3 games under 500, and I wonder if they kind of fell off in the next month if Peterson could be available. I think he's on a 1-year deal for about $9.5 million right now. He is currently hitting righties at a 286 clip with a 492 slugging percentage. So that's a lot better than what most of the Braves are doing against right-handed pitching. He would certainly be very comfortable in Atlanta if you got him for the stretch run. And again, pitching is always the hardest thing to find on the trade market because it's so valued. You probably have to give up a good bit. Paul Blackburn, I've actually mentioned this guy before as a fit for the Braves, but Paul Blackburn is a veteran pitcher with the A's. Of course, the A's are always willing to trade people away. And so he might be somebody to keep an eye on. He currently has a 4.11 ERA. So, not spectacular, but he's had stretches of being pretty good. And again, 4.11 from a veteran like Blackburn is probably better than what you're getting from Schwellenbach right now, and maybe what you could get better than what you could get from anybody else internally right now. So that's it, guys. I really think the Braves are in a position to maybe make a good run over this next month leading into the trade deadline. Love to see Ozzie Albies and Matt Olson lock it in a lot more than what they have been, and hopefully Austin Riley and Marcell Ozuna can just keep doing what they're doing. So guys, we will obviously see. I didn't talk about it much in this episode, but also thank goodness for Max Fried, for Chris Sale. I mean, our starting pitching, especially Ronaldo Lopez as well, but especially Fried and Sale. I mean, they have just been remarkably good, all-star level. I think they both should be considered top 10 pitchers in the National League. They certainly both should be, National League all-stars. Fried pitched really great today. After those first 2 really bad starts from Fried, he's been one of the best pitchers in all of baseball. So appreciate him, appreciate Chris Sale, and really appreciating Austin Riley doing what he's doing right now. So, guys, thanks for tuning in for another episode of Stay the Braves. It was really great to be back with you. I'll talk to you soon.